Welcome! I was just gonna start off way too cheery. Welcome back to my channel. I'm gonna talk about my April and May books today. I had hoped to talk about my April books in May and my May books in June now, but it just didn't work out that way. My husband and I took a trip to Budapest in April, and when we got back, I just didn't feel like doing much of anything other than what I had to do to catch up for work. Such is the way of things. But I actually have a lot of books to get through, and this is my second time trying to film this video, so I want to get going. I read 15 books in between April and May, and 10 books were physical books, 5 books were audiobooks. The way that I planned on structuring the video is that I'll talk about the physical books first and the audiobooks at the end. And then audiobooks are kind of like, I just don't get as much out of them as I hope to. And, that's like a me thing. But either way, for the physical books, the way I want to talk about them is I'm going to talk about the books that are cream of the crop. I loved these books, or one of the books that I want to talk about is an all-time favorite book that was a reread for me. And then I'll kind of go down in order in terms of like, these are the books that were really good or, good, to the ones that were just whatever. Either I didn't like them, although I don't think there's any books that I didn't like, but there's at least one that's kind of meh. So the first book that I want to talk about is Station 11. This is a reread for me. I read this for the first time in 2022. Although I purchased this book, I think like shortly after it was published, which was 2014, maybe not shortly after, but long before I eventually read it, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. Station 11, if you have not read it, is a dystopian novel that takes place mostly in the aftermath of a global pandemic. In this case, it's a flu that wipes out like 99% of the population. And the structure of the book is you're either in the present day with the characters in the aftermath, 20 years after the pandemic has ravaged the entire world, or you're in the past in the like before times. And the past timelines vary from character to character. So you're with different characters at different points in their lives before the pandemic arrived. The main characters that you're with are Kirsten. She is about, I think she's 8 years old or 9 years old or something when the pandemic hits. So then you meet her, several years later, and she's part of a group called the Traveling Symphony. It's kind of what it sounds like. It goes from place to place. It is sort of like a hodgepodge of all of these people who are all artists in some capacity, musicians and then actors, and they perform Shakespearean plays. So there is a very present theme of the arts in this book. And one of the kind of taglines from the book, although it is technically from Star Trek, survival is insufficient. So the arts, among many other things, are important to not just survival, but actually living. And that theme, that idea is of very high value to this story. You're also with another character whose name is Jeevan, and then the character you meet right at the beginning, his name is Arthur Leander, and he is sort of like the nucleus in some ways. He is the connective tissue to all of our other characters, because although they probably all have some relationship, either very direct or somewhat indirect to each other, one of the structures that Mandel likes to play with, not just within this book, but within her other books, is the idea of connective tissue, where one person has an impact on another person who then has another impact or has a different impact on another person, and so on and so forth. Sort of this ripple effect of how the people that we meet can affect the trajectory of our lives and the decisions that we make, so on and so forth. I love this book because, first of all, the writing is just impeccable. It's like haunting and beautiful, but sad and resilient. There's just so many things going on with it, but very like restrained in a way. So Mandel never gets overly weepy or anything, even though her characters are in objectively kind of tragic circumstances. And I already spoke on it, and there's so many other themes going on in this book, but I just love this idea that in order to be fully realized as a species, we need to honor the arts as fundamental to our existence, which it's easy to forget, especially in these kind of extreme, dire circumstances. So, Station 11, if you have not read this book, please read it. It's beautiful. And I read it thinking I didn't like dystopian, that wasn't my thing. And I not only obviously love this book, but it really opened me up to the genre in general. And now, like a sucker for any kind of dystopia, whatever kind of book. I have never actually finished the HBO show, but it's a long story. It's a wonderful show. It's just a little bit different from the book. So if it bothers you to like read a book and then watch a show and they don't match up 100%, keep that in mind. But it's a beautiful show too. Okay, the next one, I read this in April when my husband and I were on our trip. We went to Budapest and Prague. Wonderful places. Anyway, it's Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but I loved this book. And it's funny because I think I have a lot of the same commentary that I do with this book that I do for Station 11. I don't love it as much as Station 11, but in terms of the writing itself, it's kind of restrained in a way. It's not light on beautiful language and description and things like that, but it just doesn't feel overly done, if that makes any sense. So this book is about Cyrus Shams. He is like a 20-something Iranian American. He is kind of lost when we meet him. He lost his mother. She died when he was very young. You learn this very early on. And you also learn that his father recently died. So we meet him when he's an orphan. He is clearly a very intelligent guy, but he has been struggling with addiction. He's in recovery from, I think, alcohol. And he's just not sure what next step to take. And he's very obsessed with this idea of not just death. Death is very present in his life because grief is very present in his life, but this value that he's placing on a death that is impactful or means something. And so I think that's where our title comes in. And exclamation mark, I think, is a little bit of like a wink wink, or maybe like a teensy bit of satire, or whatever. One of his friends tells him about an art exhibit that's taking place in New York City, and he decides that he's going to go to this art exhibit because it's featuring an actual person, an artist in her real life, who is dying, I believe, from cancer or something terminal. And the exhibit is death, and come talk to a person who is in her last days before she ultimately succumbs to this disease and dies. So he is intrigued, to say the least, and he makes the journey to New York City, and he spends several days meeting with this artist. The part of the book that I loved is that, again, we're dealing with different timelines, similar structure to Station 11, where we have like a present day that's grounding the plot and moving it along, but then we are exploring the circumstances of the present day, and specifically where Cyrus is in his life vis-a-vis the other people in his life. So we spend several chapters with his mother before she died, or before his father died, and sometime with his uncle, who has had his own experiences with war and death from war and those kinds of very traumatic events. So we're looking at it from all different angles and viewpoints. I love the exploratory nature of it, like an inquisitiveness into this idea of death. Like, we're not shying away from the concept, we're like meeting it head on, and we're having these conversations, and when we're trying to meet Cyrus where he's at. I don't really annotate a lot of my books. I'm starting to do it a little bit more, but one of the things that I really loved about this book was the intentionality that the author placed, not just into the story itself, but how it's structured. So for instance, this is at the end of a chapter. To say no to a new day would be unthinkable. So each morning you said yes, then stepped into the consequence. And that's the last sentence of this chapter. And then we go to the next day in Cyrus's life in the present day. So, I mean, some people might not like that. Some people might think it's like a little bit on the nose. I personally appreciate it because to me, it's like there's a certain kind of respect that the author is giving to their reader when they are doing things like that. And that's a very obvious example. There's a lot of different kinds of devices that the author is using to infuse the story with some more, I guess, subtle meaning beyond just what's on the written page. So I found it to be a wonderful book to really engage with on several different levels. And if you enjoy reading books in that kind of like active way, then I definitely recommend picking this one up. The next book is All Fours by Miranda July. I had such a good time with this book. I think I wrote it down in my notebook as rollicking. It was a rollicking good time. This book is about a woman. She is either in or like approaching her middle age. You never learn her name throughout the book. Just something like just a little like point, I think, that the author is, making or not making so subtly. I think about just women in general when they reach this stage of their lives. But what you do learn about her is that she is married. She's very successful in her career, which is creative in its capacity. Something is going on with her at this stage in her life, and she feels dissatisfied. It's very palpable in the early stages of the book. She is planning on going on a business trip across the country, so rather than fly there, she decides that she's going to drive. And what happens to really propel the story forward is that rather than going on the trip as planned, she literally veers off course and ends up holing up in this random motel that's 30 minutes away from her house. And she spends a significant amount of time at this motel under the pretense that she is across the country on this business trip. There is a certain level of chaos to the plot and to the book because the decisions that our protagonist is making are on the surface like very questionable, very impulsive, kind of head scratchers, I would say. But I am very reluctant to call this something like a crazy person is doing, or that she's acting crazy. I don't like to use that word lightly. I have strong feelings about this like unhinged woman subgenre, I guess, of literary fiction. I think unhinged has a negative connotation, so I'm not really eager to use that word, but I suppose most people would put this in that category. I personally think that our protagonist, although it seems like she's being impulsive and it seems like she's making decisions and not really thinking about the consequences, or if she thinks about the consequences, it's like, oh, this could probably happen because I'm doing this thing, she ultimately disregards what could happen. I think it's asking the question, is she doing this because she's acting crazy, or is what she's doing valid in some way? Is this like a reckoning that she's just willing to have with herself? And is it maybe brave? Is it selfish? Do we have to put everything into a neat little box and category? All of these questions, I think Miranda July is interested in exploring through our protagonist. And I really just loved, the story was great. The writing was wonderful. It kind of reminded me of Margot from Margot's Got Money Troubles. That kind of a character. She's really smart, she's very witty, she's hilarious, but so like if Margot grew up and her life took 800 different directions than where we meet Margot, but it's got like a similar energy. So if you read that book or you listened to me talk about it or somebody else talk about it, it's not the same book, but it felt very similar to me. Definitely like a racier, we'll say, scenes. There's some crazy things going on that even and I'm not like really prudish about things, but I was taken aback, I would say, by some of the things that go on, especially, I was going to say especially at the beginning, but really throughout the book, it's a little bit like you got to cover your eyes, but don't, because you'll miss out on definitely one of the more memorable books that I've read in a long time. The next one in the really good to very good, are those different? Category is A Passage North I'm not even going to try to say his name because every time I do, it's embarrassing. So, A Passage North. I read this for Sunbeam's Jess. I can't remember her last name, but Sunbeam's Jess on YouTube. She has a Patreon and a book club, and I just joined it. And anyway, this was the May book, and I read it the last week of May. The story is, it's sort of like Martyr in a way, in the sense that our protagonist is a young man. His name is Krishan, but he is Sri Lankan. And the reason I draw a parallel between them is they are young men of a similar age, and they are kind of dealing with similar things in a sense. So one thing I didn't mention with Martyr is that Cyrus is Iranian American, and so this question of like identity is a big thing for him because he was brought with his father to America when he was very, very young. So he grapples with having that duality to him of being Iranian and American, and how do you marry the two? That's not exactly what's happening in this book, but because this book deals very much with the Sri Lankan Civil War, and so there's some displacement, leaving a place and returning to a place, and I just feel like, those kinds of ideas lend themselves to the same kind of inquiries and journeys of self-discovery. In this book, Krishan is living with his grandmother and mother. His grandmother is, elderly, of course, and he gets a call that the woman who had taken care of his grandmother for a long time, Rainey, has died very suddenly and in a very dramatic fashion. So he makes the decision that he's going to attend her funeral services. So he takes this train, a very long train ride, from Colombo into the war-torn northern province of Sri Lanka for Rainey's funeral. So it's on this train ride that he is, the best way I can describe it is like anytime that I've gone home, but anytime I go back on the plane, I'm always, it's like a slideshow basically of all of these really random memories that I have, and they are very scattered, and it seems like there's absolutely no connection between one memory to the next memory, but it all has the cohesion of being like my childhood, right? So a similar thing is happening here. The other triggering event for this reflection period for Krishan is that right before he leaves, or right around the time, he receives an email from an ex-girlfriend, and this ex-girlfriend had a very profound impact on him, and especially his relationship to his country and to the war specifically, and his like stance in relation to the war. So all of these very like fundamental components of who he is and how he identifies, he's grappling with on this passage north. And this is a book that it's, I would say, slower paced, but it reads very quickly. It's less than 300 pages, and it's just beautiful writing. And it's very rich with imagery. It's very evocative. There's a lot of symbolism here, so you can engage with it on a much deeper level if that's something that you're interested in doing. I mean, it is literary fiction. So if that is something that interests you and you're in kind of that headspace to be a little bit more active with your reading, that's where I am right now. I'm kind of done with thrillers and doing easy reads for right now. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just I don't know, my brain is like wanting to do a little bit more, and so I'm trying to take advantage and reading these books that I might otherwise not pick up, hence why some of these like book club things are so valuable. Okay, the next one is the only nonfiction book that I've read. I don't tend to read a ton of nonfiction, but this one is The Art Thief by Michael Finkel, and this one is great because it is nonfiction, but it kind of reads like a fiction or like a crime thriller almost. Again, it's not very long, and I read this on our trip as well. I got a lot of reading done on this trip, even though we were like super active, more so than we usually are. But this tells a story of a European man. Was he German? I can't remember, but his name is Stefan Breitweiser. He's described here as being the most prolific art thief of all time. And that is, I don't know if that's true, but certainly he was prolific. That's for sure. The account is that he is living in Europe in This is all like in the 1990s, I believe. He's living in his mother's house with his girlfriend, and he has, I would say, an obsession with art, and he's very knowledgeable, but he convinces himself, or he's always had this idea, it's kind of unclear, the origin story, at least from my memory, it's unclear, but he feels almost like entitled to this very old, very valuable art, and he uses this justification that only he can really properly tend to and care for and love and appreciate this art if it's in his possession. So he then goes on a years-long, I'm gonna call it a spree, because he stole literally like millions and millions of dollars worth of art. And there's definitely an addictive quality to this. So I think it begs the question, does he truly feel this way? Does he truly feel like he is the only proper or appropriate appreciator and steward of this art? Or is there something deeper going on? And I don't know that the author is really interested in exploring that. Frankly, it's just a fun caper read, and I think if you do want to engage with it on a deeper level, it invites you to do that, to sort of question the psychology behind all of these things. If you're my husband, you're on the train with me and I'm telling you the story, you dismiss the whole thing as him being a, quote, klepto-psycho. So, it doesn't really matter, I guess. I just thought it was interesting. And if you like art history, Europe, like anything like that, then I think you'd enjoy this book. I was mostly just astonished at the lack of security at these museums, which, to be fair, maybe you don't expect something like this is going to happen, but when it becomes a problem to the level that this did, I was just pretty surprised. The next one is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I should know how to pronounce that name, but it's my first Ishiguro, so I don't know, be nice. And maybe I'll learn how to pronounce the name properly. This is certainly not a new book. I don't know when it came out, but it's fair to say several years ago. And this is another, I hesitate to call it sci-fi. I think it is labeled as sci-fi, and there's certainly sci-fi elements, but I would describe this more as literary fiction with a dystopian tone. So in this book, we meet our main character who we're with, whose name is Kath, and she is at what seems to be just like a run-of-the-mill boarding school with a couple of her friends that we're with throughout the story as well. Their names are Ruth and Tommy. And there's a mundaneness to this story, but Ishiguro, he's very, again, this is another book where restrained prose, it's very sparse in a way. And if you're not paying attention, you could dismiss this book as, what is this book about? It's about nothing. It's not about nothing. And I think what Ishiguro does very smartly is he just peppers it with enough to make you question, who are these kids? And what is this place? And who are these guardians that are watching over them? And what are these little hints that they're getting that everything is not what it seems. I'm going to stop there because I had the benefit of going into this book somehow completely blind. I had no idea what it was about. I thought it was going to be much different than it was. So I was very happy that it turned out differently because I feel like it's more rewarding that way. So I will just say I found it to be very good. I think a lot of people love this book, and probably the reason for me why it's not like I loved the book is because it's just that I've read other similar fiction by now, and certainly this is not an unexplored genre, so to me it's not the cream of the crop, but it's definitely worth reading, and I would very happily pick up another Ishiguro. I know that his books are quite beloved by a great many people. So anyway, Never Let Me Go, very good. The next one in this category, although I'm gonna put this it's like very good to good. And it's Fleishman Is in Trouble by Taffy Brodesser-Akner. I don't know, Taffy. I'm gonna draw a parallel between this one and All Fours. And the reason I'm doing that is because something I forgot to mention with All Fours. The only issue I had with All Fours, and it's not an issue, it's more of an issue in this book, is that story can really only happen if our protagonist is, as she very openly admits and flaunts to a certain extent, is she's like very, very wealthy and very privileged. A lot of that it just simply cannot happen. Like people who don't have the means to like explore all of these, I just spit on myself. A lot of people don't have the luxury of just assuming that, you know, their husband is going to take care of their kid and they just do whatever they want for a few weeks and they have just gobs of money to toss around. So it's very kind of like rich people problems. The difference between All Fours and this book is that I feel like Miranda July in All Fours is very aware of that, and it's used as a device so it doesn't detract from the story. This book is similar in that we are dealing with very wealthy people, and those people are the Fleischmans. We are mainly with Toby Fleischman. He is in the throes of his separation/divorce from his wife, Rachel, and they are navigating this new chapter of their relationship because they also have 2 kids together. The conflict in the story arises when Rachel just suddenly deposits the kids at Toby's apartment, and then she leaves, saying she's going to leave, but she then vanishes. Nobody can find her. And Toby, he never quite gets to like worried about her. He's more just mad at her because he's of the attitude, Rachel always does this kind of shit, so what else is new? And she's always making my life more difficult. Point of view is very important in this story. So you are mainly looking at things from Toby's point of view via one of his very good friends whose name I believe is Libby. And although Libby is definitely Team Toby in this whole thing, she's not without judgment for Toby. And Toby's basically just trying to manage essentially being a single parent and not being super concerned about what's going on with Rachel. And I think what the author does very well is she goes right up to the edge of your tolerance probably for finding some kind of resolution with the story. When I looked at the reviews after I finished it, some people were turned off by the structure of the book and the characters in general. The characters do at times become insufferable, but I don't need to like my characters all the time. In fact, I kind of like that tension where I'm trying to find some compassion for the characters. So to me, that's a feature, not a bug. I felt very rewarded by the conclusion of this story. Not everybody feels that way, and I can see why that would be, but this was very good. And I think the important thing for me is that I just managed to read this at the right time. It was another one that's been sitting on my shelf for years because there's also a Hulu show and I wanted to read it. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I haven't watched the Hulu show, but the book is, you know, it's definitely worth a read. And she has another book that I heard good things about that I do have a copy of called Long Island Compromise that I hope to read at some point before the end of the year. I'm trying to think. I know I have a couple of books. Oh, I have one book that I can't find the copy of, and the irony in that is that I had 2 at one point, and it's called The Man Made of Smoke. It was very okay. The author is Alex North. I read The Whisper Man, a few years ago, and then he had another one that he wrote that was fine, not as good as I remember The Whisper Man to be. I was very creeped out by The Whisper Man. I like this author, so I got it as my book of the month pick, and I read it right away. It's a serial killer novel. Father and son at different times are trying to find this serial killer because of an event that occurred in the past. I don't know if it's really worth exploring much more. It's what it sounds like. I think the writing is decent. That sounds like a negative thing. The writing is pretty good. Hard to talk about these thrillers anymore because they all start to blend together, which is why I'm trying to not read as many of them. I really need a break, and this is where like I need to activate my brain a little bit more. I think it's very much a solid 3-star book and probably a very good beach read if you're looking for summertime reading. The last physical book that I read was An Apprenticeship or the Book of Pleasures by Clarice Lispector. I don't have much to say about the book, and this is not in any category. I don't know that I'm ready for Lispector yet. She's a little too, abstract for me, I think. I still need to be grounded in something more than what I feel like I got from this book. And I'm so laughably in the minority from what I understand in this, that I don't always feel this way, but like I think that it's me. I'm not quite trained as a reader right now. My muscles have atrophied and I need to work them out before I'm ready to take on the weight of Liz Spector and understand it and get anything out of. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. I think I'm gonna try to reread hopefully soon. I rented the book from the library, so I read it, but shouldn't count it because I don't know how much I truly got from it, which is kind of embarrassing to admit, but hey, I think, there's some strength in admitting our weaknesses, and I am not ready for Liz Spector yet. The next one's, they're just the audiobooks. That's all I have left. Let's see, there's two that I read that I don't have anything to say about them, which are The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley and Show Don't Tell by Curtis Sittenfeld. The Midnight Feast, I don't have anything to say about because, again, it's just like a thriller. I think it was enjoyable enough, and I don't remember anything about it other than it's like a lot of characters and there's this solstice kind of thing going on at a resort. Again, it's not memorable, I guess is the point. Like entertaining, but not memorable to me. The next one is the Show Don't Tell by Curtis Sittenfeld. I know I really liked that audiobook, that it was really funny. It's a collection of fictional essays. The problem is that I can't remember anything other than those very general descriptions. And I think what I need to do is actually physically read the book because I can't engage with audiobooks the same way for the most part. I will say another audiobook that I read by Curtis Sittenfeld, because I liked that one so much, I was like, I want to read something else. So I listened to Prep by Curtis Sittenfeld, and the character in Prep, Lee Fiora, there's an essay in Show Don't Tell that follows Lee Fiora into her adulthood. So I guess I just feel like I read it out of order. So I'm going to reread Show Don't Tell. Prep was very good. It's a polarizing book. Basically, the plot in Prep is that you're with the main character, Lee Fiora. When we meet her, she's a freshman in high school and she's attending this elite boarding school in New England. She's from Indiana. She's a teenage girl. She's awkward. She's not super popular. She's likable, but she's not the most well-liked. She's average, I guess is maybe the best way to put it. But she's not. She's complicated. She has emotions. She has insecurities. She's awkward. She's jealous. She can be mean, but she can also be really funny. She can be very charming, and she is complicated, in other words. And we're with her throughout her years at this boarding school. When I read the reviews after I finished it, some of the critiques were nothing happens and she's so annoying and frustrating. That's part of the point. So if that would frustrate you, again, if you need your characters to be likable, I'm saying that it's a bad thing. It's not. If you prefer to enjoy the people that you're spending time with, even though they're fictional, that's fine. Maybe skip this one. She has periods where she's very likable and periods where she's intensely unlikable. Nothing happens in the sense that there's not a huge occurrence. I mean, she's just at school. But to me, there's a lot that's happening in the course of that. Maybe that's because I could identify with her to a certain extent. I enjoyed it. I also will say I thought that it worked very well as an audiobook. It's very long and I got to spend a lot of time with it. I think the actual book is over 400 pages. That might test my patience a little bit, but the audiobook was good. I personally thought that the narration was very good. So always important when you're listening to an audiobook, right? I have two more audiobooks. The first one is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan. Again, I'm going to embarrass myself if I try, so I will not. Hi, Ace. This was very short, if I remember correctly. I liked the narration. The story is about two sisters. You're with the older sister. I don't remember their names. And the younger sister is a serial killer. That's stated right up front. So you're really exploring this sisterly relationship more than anything else. Way to go, buddy. Down. You're really exploring the sisterly relationship more than anything else. Find it a stretch to call it a thriller. It was enjoyable. The characters, are more diverse. I'm saying that like there's a very much Black culture, African culture that's present. So for me, it's memorable because I just don't read a ton of books like that. I think like this was a good reading period for me because I read a little bit outside the norm. But I mean, Fleishman, all fours, even Station 11, that we're not talking about hugely diverse things. So that's something that I would like to try to keep in mind as I'm reading the rest of the year. And then the last one, speaking of white characters, Funny Story by Emily Henry. I can't believe I'm going to end this on Emily Henry because, well, maybe it's a good thing because, you know, most people don't make it to the end of my videos. I am not going to read any more Emily Henry. She's not for me. I appreciate her as like a gateway for people who don't like romance to read romance. And I appreciate her writing. She's smart. She's really charming. All of her characters are really charming, but they're all the same. I'm sorry. The diversity of her characters is like one of her main characters is like really fun and bubbly, and then another one is like a workaholic, and then another one has issues like getting close to people. It's like me throughout the span of a month. Like one day I feel like talking to people, the next day I don't, and I don't want to talk to anybody. It's just the same person over and over again, and I feel like the same is true for the male counterparts. A lot of times the tension in the conflict in the book is like very contrived to me or manufactured, and the resolution takes too long for me. Really the only reason that I read the books, and I don't think I've ever actually physically read an Emily Henry book. I always listen to it on audiobook because I do think Julia Wayland does a good job. But yeah, it's cute and it's funny. I don't have to expend a lot of brain power on it. But I know Emily Henry, like people worship at the altar of Emily Henry, and I do think she's talented. She's just not for me, at least not at this particular moment of my life. So I'm gonna take a little pause on Emily Henry, and I just wish that my Instagram feed would do me the courtesy of acknowledging the pause that I would like to take. But so far it has not done that. Anyway, well, maybe because I also keep reading her books. That's it for the books that I read, I believe. If I missed anything, oh, I did miss one. I'll talk about it in my next one because technically I finished it this morning and it's June 3rd, so I will talk about it in my June 3rd, in my June wrap up. It's very late in the day. I am reading Brave New World this month for a book club that I'm in. I'm also reading Our Evenings. I can't remember the name of the author. And then the book club that I am right now so far just lurking around on, but am at least trying to follow along with the books, is Beware of Pity by Stefan Zweig. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. I'm looking forward to reading those. And then I'd also like to read a few more, you know, from my own personal shelves, because those are all pretty much book club things. So hopefully by the time I talk again, hopefully by my next video, I will have read all of those books and have more to talk about. And yeah, until then, I hope that everybody's having a really great start to their summer. I'm very excited about summer this year for some reason. I'm not usually. I'm more of like a fall winter girl, but summer is just sounds like a really good idea right now. I am looking forward to all my reading, and I hope that everybody's looking forward to their reading as well, and that you guys all have a great reading month of June or summer in its entirety, depending on the next time that I get it together to record one of my videos. All right, bye. Oh yeah, I don't know, like and subscribe. I can't really do it like with a straight face, but it'd be cool. So if you want to, go ahead and do it. Oof, she's gonna bark again. All right, goodbye for real.